Native American tribes have long fought for control over the natural resources on their ancestral lands, including water, minerals, forests, and wildlife. Some argue that tribes should have exclusive rights to these resources based on treaties, historical ownership, and sovereignty. Others believe that natural resources should be shared with the broader public. So, should Native Americans have special rights over natural resources, or would that create unfair advantages? One of the strongest arguments for tribal resource rights is historical justice. Many Native nations signed treaties with the U.S. government that guaranteed them access to hunting, fishing, and land-based resources. However, these treaties have been violated repeatedly, with tribes losing access to the lands and waters they once depended on. For example, the U.S. has dammed rivers, polluted waterways, and overfished regions once managed by Native communities, making it harder for tribes to sustain themselves. As Cherokee activist Rebecca Nagel states, "These are not special rights. These are treaty rights that have been ignored for too long." Another key issue is tribal sovereignty. Many Native nations argue that their lands and resources should not be subject to state or federal control. Some tribes, like the Lummi Nation in Washington, have successfully used treaty rights to fight environmental destruction, blocking projects that threaten salmon populations. Others, like the Standing Rock Sioux, have fought against pipelines and oil drilling that could contaminate their water sources. Granting tribes full control over their natural resources would allow them to protect their land, enforce conservation laws, and develop sustainable economies. However, critics argue that giving tribes exclusive control over natural resources could lead to economic inequalities. Some worry that non-native communities near reservations could be restricted from using water, forests, or minerals they historically depended on. Others argue that some tribes have chosen to lease their resources to corporations, participating in industries like coal mining, oil drilling, and commercial fishing. Opponents claim that if tribes are allowed to profit from resources while avoiding state and federal regulations, it could create legal and economic conflicts. A potential compromise is co-management agreements, where tribes and government agencies share decision-making power over natural resources. This model has been successful in areas like the Great Lakes, where tribes and state governments work together to manage fish populations. However, many Native leaders argue that tribes should not have to compromise for what was already there. So, should Native Americans have special rights over natural resources? Yes, but not as special privileges, rather as legal and historical rights that should be honored. The real question is, when will the U.S. uphold its treaty obligations and recognize Native nations as rightful stewards of their own land? What do you think? Let's continue the conversation.